In 3, 2, 1.
Hi, fellas. Welcome to The Greater Good. My name's Tony.
And I'm Joe.
And this is the channel where we come up with creative ideas, thoughts, and share suggestions and advice to help people improve their lives and join in becoming part of the greater good.
Let's dive in. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another excellent episode of The Greater Good Roundtable discussion here. We've been trying out a new kind of style with these videos, and we're really enjoying it. One thing that we've been trying to do is pick kind of relevant topics that people might have an opinion about, and we kind of discuss some questions relevant to that, and not really pick a side as of yet, but discuss our thoughts on it and encourage you to get involved and to share your thoughts and opinions about it. You know, as long as you stay civil in the comments, we'd love to hear from you. Today's discussion is a pretty relevant one, in my opinion. We're kind of talking about the state of the world, how it is with being quarantined and the COVID-19 virus going around, the states being especially hard hit, and people having to stay at home for a couple months now, with not a definite end in sight, right? So we thought that today we'd discuss, is there a clearing in sight? And if there is, when that comes, or should we rush back to normal, or is there going to be a new normal coming out of this? So we thought that we'd tackle that kind of discussion today, right, Tony? So we're gonna just jump right into it. I'm gonna toss you up the first question, Tony. Right now, I think there's things that are tough for everybody right now, especially some more than others. My biggest fear, personally, I'll just say it right now, is that people are rushing back to get to normal without any kind of time spent for reflection on what's happening. So what do you think, what lessons, if any, have we as a society learned so far from this experience? And what are your opinions about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, the whole thing is very interesting, you know, and I think you are seeing kind of a little bit of a divide of people who, you know, just want to get back to that state of normalcy, or as quickly as possible, and then there's other people who, you know, want to take precautions, really be considerate of things that we should. But I think you're right. I think that there are kind of lessons to be learned, you know, and things to be reflected on, you know, and then considered. Like, I don't think we should jump through, you know, to any type of like, let's go 100% this way and say, like, you know, everyone has to stay social distance, and then, like, you know, because it just seems like if you go down that road, you know, it just seems like there'll be another thing to keep on piling on, like, you know, first it was like, let's flatten the curve, you know, now it's like, it seems like, all right, let's wait for a vaccine. But it's like, all right, well, my thought is, what happens, you know, a couple years from now if another outbreak comes? Like, this is what
Yeah.
I think we should be learning and looking at. Like, you know, what are the best strategies to take, you know, and prepare for future? Because then you get in the same boat. Like, you got to wait for another vaccine to come out, and everyone has to quarantine in their homes again and wear face masks. Like, it just seems like there probably is a better solution if and when an outbreak does occur. So I think you're right on that fact, where it should be time to reflect a little bit and make sensical plans, you know, and sensical ideas for the near future and for what might come down the line there.
Hmm.
Like it is in the minds of everyone where one, how long for a vaccine, if you're on that boat, and then like two, what's next, what are the next thoughts on if and when this does occur again. So um yeah, I mean, it is a crazy, it definitely has changed the world as we know it, and for better or for worse, but it's one of those things where let's think about it, and let's use some common sense and think about things that we maybe can do without, or maybe we can enact at least try and see if they work, as opposed to
Hmm.
like this is it, and everyone has to do this 100%, and there is no going back or trying anything else. I think keeping an open mind is going to be very beneficial to creating plans down the future. What are your thoughts on that? What do you think is some of the lessons that we should kind of take away from this?
Um, yeah, I think that one of the things that we can take away from this is that leadership is important, and being decisive early on. You know, I think that deferring to facts, to science, or the experts in their respective fields is going to be important. Rather than playing on you know emotions or maybe misinformation that's being widespread. I think that's one thing that we should definitely take apart from this is everybody turns towards information, and I think we touched upon this in our last episode. But we cling to information because evolutionarily it's been vital. It's been an advantage. But now it's kind of we're in this paradoxical world where information is kind of pervasive, and there's a lot of false information being perpetuated there. So I think that instead of just attaching onto information because it's new and fresh and you're the first one to hear it and it's sensationalized, I think we're going to have to be able to find ways to reliably fact check information before it gets spread. I think that that's important. So leadership, fact checking information, and I think that an over reliance on a capitalistic lifestyle could be reevaluated as well. I think that we might need to think about more kind of creating social structures or social aspects. I don't want to say anything too outlandish, but yeah, we need access to healthcare for people, right? And I think that people just need to reevaluate what's a priority in their lives, not be fighting over toilet paper in a Walmart, because of fear mongering. But yeah,
Yeah,
there's lots of things that we can learn from it. But I think that uh, it is something that we should learn from, not just try to sweep it under the rug as quickly as possible, right? So,
yeah.
what, what about
I think you're right. I think we do have a tendency in society to kind of like, oh, thank God that's over with, and then like that short term memory kind of like kicks in, and it's like,
yeah,
all right, like a month down the road, we've already forgotten. It's kind of like, oh, thank God we're out of this, and we really just you move on without really thinking too much more about it. And like, all right, what are some things that we can collectively take away from that? And how can everyone actively do their part?
yeah,
Yeah, this
yeah, I
tends
agree.
to be usually like a we're just happy to be done, quote unquote done with coronavirus, and people kind of move on with their lives. But it's something like, hey, now that we know, like we've had this experience. Like
Mhm.
let's learn from it. Let's
The the thing is,
prepare.
this is not the first coronavirus. It's the first one to reach pandemic levels, I guess you can say, depending on definitions. But we've had coronavirus epidemics before. Um, SARS, the SARS virus back in I think 2003, and the MERS virus. Those are both corona style
H1N1,
viruses.
yeah.
Yeah. But the problem is that once the viruses, like they were probably more deadly, but just less transmittable, if I recall correctly. So they just weren't as reaching as many people and going undetected like this current one is COVID-19. But the problem was once they kind of weren't on the front page of the news anymore, then the interests dried up, and so did the funding for research into creating cures for those viruses, right?
Mm.
But I believe that if the funding had continued, even though those viruses were no longer a threat, we might be in a better position now to understand how this virus works because it's basically a cousin to the ones that we've seen before. So I think that we should, put resources into studying this kind of thing in the future. But on a grander scale, I think we as a society need to realize that there are a lot of people that put in grunt work, to make our society operate, and we don't really either acknowledge it, understand it, or appreciate it as much as we do. So with that, my next question would be, who do you think is affected the most by this virus at this point, and who's most responsible to take care of those that are worst hit by this virus?
Uh, I mean, who's most affected by it? I mean, that's
I think everybody's affected by it, but I guess, who's being hit the worst, in your opinion?
the worst. Yeah. Um, yeah, I want to say the elderly population's probably been hit the worst. Um, it's a lot of it. They rely on visitors coming to visit them. If they're in a home or whatever. And it's like they're fragile to begin with. So you put this on top of it, like it's walking on eggshells. So it's really tough, I think, for them to deal with a situation like that. Whereas most of them already have underlying conditions, so you throw like fuel on the fire, so to speak, and it makes a tough condition even worse, and them not being able to have a reduced social aspect from family members is really puts an extra burden on it emotionally. um
Hmm.
and uh, I think everybody, man, like it's really tough to kind of single like a one area that's like hit the worst. It's like anybody who's been out of work, due to this, anybody, the small business owners that have been forced to close up and may never recover, like those are people too. And it's
Yeah.
I think it's a collective responsibility. I don't think it's just the responsibility of the government or the political
Mhm.
people to try and be the overall support. I think it's everybody. I think it's the communities coming together and supporting one another, and I think that's happening. I think history has kind of showed that like during hard times, most people come together and help each other to weather the storm. Um, it's hard to see right now because most of the time you see that like if a hurricane hits somewhere or a tornado, like you see the news coverage of people
Yeah.
supporting each other and you hear about it, but it's right now it's hard to see that because everyone's going through it. That communities and people are helping each other. You do hear some of it, but I don't think you see it as much. Um, but yeah, that's when it comes down. I mean, as a as
Mm.
a society, world society, they're just that's everyone's responsibilities to help out and do their part to get each other through this. You know, any way they can, whether it's through donations or through active support. Um, but sitting back and just saying like, you know, the government has to figure everything out, I think is what wishful thinking in one way, and you know, two, not 100% their responsibility to do that.
Yeah.
Um, you know, and my thought is, you know, I think that regardless of what happens, you know, we are going to have to kind of think about different ways that we can be supportive of each other. You know, on
Yeah.
any type of thing. I think we're really fortunate. We live in a time where right now, like this, we can do the technology thing, and everyone can at least see themselves face to face. So even though you don't got that, you know, close connection, you're still be able to, you know, have some type of connection and be able to see each other, even though you're not able to actually be in person with each other.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
I don't
I really
know.
like that.
What's up?
I like. I said I really like that analogy of like when there's a hurricane or a tornado coming through, you know, and because I feel like yeah, right now we're kind of like in it. And when there's a like a natural disaster like that occurring, it's kind of hard to see the damage until after it's over and it blows away, and then you can kind of see all the rubble and what needs to be repaired. And so I think that you're right. I think there are people taking steps. I've seen a lot of YouTube channels running fundraisers, and I've heard stories of people like donating their stimulus check to, you know, rent out a band who was unemployed to play for the social care workers and stuff like that, just to boost morale. So
Yeah,
it's heartening to hear these kind of stories. But I think that you'll see the real efforts start to come together when we can kind of see the total extent, you know, sort of when it's all died down, so to speak.
yeah,
Oh yeah, yeah,
yeah.
good analogy
Yes.
there.
So what do you think, man? Do you think more people are in that boat where, you know, they just they just want to get back to normal, or do you think like more people are like, no, we need to have some type of new normal? And if so, like, what does new normal look like? You know, what do you see as a new normal?
uh, if I had to guess, I would say that most people want to get back to normal, back to their pre-pandemic lifestyles. Um, I think that people would be happy. I've heard lots of people from all different walks of life making comments like, "Yeah, I just can't wait to get back." They want to get back to
Hmm.
work. They want to get out of the house. They want to get back to the gym or to the saloonist or whatever they've been doing. You know, um, I as I mentioned before, I think that we should reflect before just rushing back. I think that our society was kind of being built on a bunch of tinder, like almost like a tinderbox, and this is kind of a match that's kind of, uh, or more like maybe a magnifying glass that's kind of shown a light on some of the issues that we need to pay more attention to, like healthcare. You know, that's an ongoing discussion, but hopefully this kind of magnifies the importance of that, right? Because I think that everybody's just trying to get by. They want to live their lives and they want to enjoy their lives and whatever time we have on this world. And then when you're spending when you know the average American is spending a lot of time worrying about, you know, having enough insurance or healthcare or where their next paycheck's going to come from, these kind of things. What kind of life is that? You know, so I think that we need to kind of maybe pay attention to how we can make life more manageable for everybody. Um, maybe if it's, I think that the powers that be, not just in a political office, but from like corporate standpoints and people that are profiteering off of advertisements, the industry, and using real internet real estate to put up that ad before you watch our videos. Those, like, they're gonna probably do what they can to protect the status quo, to protect their existence. But I think that we as a society might we decide how relevant that is, and maybe that's the discussion we need to have, is say, well, how much of this should we just mindlessly consume, to the detriment of ourselves sometimes, and how much of it should be, I don't want to say regulated, but maybe we just need to reevaluate what's important to us as a society. And I don't know if that has to happen on an individual level, ironically, or if there should be a kind of a wider discussion about if and how that would make a difference. I don't know
Yeah,
if that makes
yeah.
sense. Yeah.
No, it does. I think you're right, and I think it's not just I think that, maybe there should be some type of organization or something like that, or that has like that they meet just for reviewing like current ways of life, and seeing if they are working out to their fullest benefit, or like making sure that they are still working out as they were designed to when they first were created. I think that, like, every area, like every piece of, like, and I'm sure, like, on an individual area there are people who look at it, but like I think nobody really kind of puts it all together as an overview and kind of addresses it. um Healthcare, obviously there's people working on that to try and bring the most benefits to everyone, but like, how do you bring it together with insurance, and like make it less of a a worry or a burden on people. It seems like with the way we are now, we shouldn't have some of these things. With the way technology is, with the way we are in modern society, it seems like we kind of need to do press the update button on on ourselves. I think another one that we could probably visit and do a whole discussion on is the education area, and like,
Yeah.
is it necessary to teach children everything that we teach them? And should there be other things that we should incorporate into the teachings? And I think that's probably could we could do an overhaul on education. You know, uh, so many areas, like about discussion, like nutrition. What is the best elements? Is it necessary to have hundreds of acres dedicated to farm and livestock, when that could be used for other types of resources that it might be more beneficial? So I think, like, taking an overhaul, I think this, you know, unfortunately, I don't think it will happen like that. But I think
Mhm.
now more than ever might be a good time to kind of, hey, we're given a chance here to kind of hit that reset button,
Yeah.
and reflect on things, and what makes sense, what doesn't make sense, and if it doesn't make sense, why should we keep doing it? Is there a better way? You know?
I think historically we've been kind of trusting that the people in charge, the people making the decisions, have had our best interests in mind, and I think it's time to start to bring in more people from different walks of life into that decision making process. I think you're right. I think now is the perfect time to update. And what happens when you update any of your devices? You need to reboot it, right? You need to shut it down and then start it up again. And this is kind of the shutdown. We've shut down.
Yeah.
So before we start up again, we need to put that update in place. Or if you want a different analogy, you can think of a forest fire, right? Sometimes if you want something to grow, you have to raise it all to the ground first, and then then something more beautiful can get out of there, right? Grow in the emptiness. I don't know.
Yeah.
I like a bit of the chaos that comes in. I kind of thrive off that because I think that out of the ashes, something more, something beautiful or more relevant can be born. It could be constructed. We've been using old
Yeah.
systems, antiquated systems, in my opinion, for lots of things, including healthcare and education, and even higher education like college. The idea of careers, I feel, is a 20th century invention that no longer kind of fits in our world, that we're still trying to shove that square peg into a round hole to make work, you know? And I think so nowadays, especially with the advent of the technology that we have and how it's changed rapidly just in the past 2 decades or even decade, this is a perfect opportunity to look at those kind of basic structures of life and how we operate, and see if we can't adapt it to be more suited to how people live their lives today, right? Rather than
Mm-hmm.
creating dissonance that causes a lot of people stress and mental health issues, right?
Yeah.
So, with that in mind, my last question for you is, what what lasting change do you want to see implemented coming out of this, you personally? I know we just kind of talked a lot about this, but if you had to pick one
Yeah.
thing, I guess.
One thing, if I had to say, I mean, it seems like there's there's a story that's kind of not being like put so much light onto, and that's like the mental health, um you know that's the effect on people's mental health that they're going through. And like, if you
Mm.
kind of look at the numbers there, you're seeing a lot of cases of increase in alcohol consumption, increase in drug abuse, increase in suicides, increase in depression and anxiety, um, just over a span of 2 months. Everyone's in panic, everyone's in fear, and they're acting out. So I would say, like, you got to start having, I know that it's like they do it like I think for most schools they do it on like an individual basis. Like, if they think someone needs mental health, it's like they have counselors that you can talk to. But I think it has to be like an overall, like, we've been having these struggles in the Western culture and abroad, for a long time. And it used to be like like, let's keep that in the closet. If like somebody had a mental health
Mm.
condition, it was like, let's kind of bury it, like you were ashamed of having it. Like, if you were depressed, or someone who was like cutting themselves, it was like you didn't want anyone to know about it. It was kind of like put you in the closet. So I think out of this, it's like seeing how bad, like how things can get, you know maybe it's time to have that as like a forefront discussion. Like, needs to be something that children learn about, adults learn about. Like, that's required to be taught. Like, hey, there's this thing called a mind and a brain, and sometimes it experiences different thoughts and emotions. And I mean, obviously, I'm not the expert, but I think like you having a course and the understanding, and ways to uh, deal's not the best word, but ways to go about, like, handling when you are anxious and not turning to drugs or alcohol or suicide. I think is very important. I think it's gonna one of those things that could really start to turn the light on and advance society. So if I had to
Yeah.
pick one thing, I think it's us learning that we're all vulnerable. We all have underlying conditions that are now being brought to light, and that we can do something about this. What about you?
Yeah.
What's your what do you think of that? And what would your be your one change that you
Well,
want to enact?
I think that's a really good point, Tony. I think you're right. Traditionally, mental health issues have been stigmatized in the past, and people have been ashamed if they've suffered with it. They feel like that's something that's wrong with them, and they have to shoulder that burden alone. People don't often look for help when that's all they when they need it, right? And often, I don't know how it's been portrayed in the movies or the TV shows, but it does. I'm sure that portrayal doesn't help, right? So I think that we do need to uh, readjust people's the society's opinion about this, and see that it's more widespread, especially in today's world where even though we're more connected, we feel more isolated often. And
Hmm.
that was the thing that I would take away from this, is actually that how important the social aspect of society is. And I'm not talking about
Hmm.
social media, although these platforms have actually shown that they can be very useful in situations like this, right?
Hmm.
Rather than just something to veg out on. I'm sure people are, have watched every single episode of Tiger King or whatever on Netflix, and but I'm talking about ways to connect and to show off your talent, and to share ideas. And that's how we have evolved to be the alpha species that we are now, is because of our connections. We weren't bigger, stronger, or more adapted to the environment 200,000 years ago, when our ancestors were hunting down woolly mammoths and trying to survive in the ice ages and stuff like that. What kept us alive and what helped us to thrive was our way to communicate and to share our ideas and work together as a group. So I think that we should value that more, in my opinion,
Hmm.
and find ways to embrace that connection and to work together, and to maybe that should be taught in society as ways that you can kind of bridge social connections. And I think that if we could do that, that would also help not eradicate, but possibly greatly reduce the amount of mental order disorders that we suffer with as well.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, that's my takeaway, is build social connections. I know that we have the illusion of it, but I think we need to make more genuine connections, in my opinion. I think that people in the restaurants with their faces and their devices, rather than having real life conversations, needs to be readapted.
Hmm.
So there you have it. That's our opinion on the state of the world as it is now, and what we'd like to see changing, what be the new normal coming out of this, right? What are your thoughts? Do you agree with Tony? Do you agree with me? Do you have any opinions? Do you disagree? We'd love to hear that. Please
Yeah.
feel free to share your thoughts and opinions in the comments, and keep it civil, and we'll jump in there and get involved. Until then, Tony.
Till then, same black hair, same two twins. Thank you for joining. We'll catch you on the next one. Love you, bro. Be good.
Love you too, man.